It's been just over a year since I picked up the a7rv to be my main photo and video camera. During that time, I've taken over 76,000 photos on this, as well as hours and hours of video, and this has given me enough experience to give you a long-term and in-depth review on this camera, whether you should buy it, who is it for, is it worth the money. As with all of these gear videos that I make, it's worth keeping in mind that I have no relationship with Sony. I paid for this camera with my own money, and I am not in the business to make friends with camera companies. Therefore, I will share my honest opinion about what I like and don't like about these systems. So rest assured, I am not here trying to sell you this, just sharing my experience. Now, I know many people treat their cameras better than their kids from the second marriage. However, this is a tool. It's not a prized possession that's to be worshipped. So I use it in such a way. This camera has been dropped. It's been thrown into a bag full of random things. It's never seen the inside of a camera cube, and it's been used very heavily in every possible condition. On the beach, it had sand in it, it had water in it, and I mean, it looks fine. There is a few bits of wear and tear around the edges, but for the most part, once you clean it up and give it a little polish and remove, the little oils from your hands from the edges, it looks really good. As for reliability, I have not really had any issues. I've had a handful of freezes where the camera just randomly froze for no good reason, and I needed a battery reset to fix that. But I mean, maybe 4 or 5 times over the year that's happened. I've never had any overheating issues. I've never had any corrupted files or unusual behavior. I did have this little button that locks the dial stick because I spilled some beer in there, but a quick rinse under the tap and a violent attack of a toothbrush fixed that very quickly. So yeah, it's been a very reliable camera. Speaking of running it under the tap, Sony says it's weather resistant. However, like most camera companies, they will never tell you exactly how weather resistant this is, because obviously they don't want to end up in hot water. With that said, I have used this in downpours. I've also used this in Vietnam. There's like a giant dragon bridge in Da Nang that spits out water. It's literally like standing underneath 10 showers, and I was right under it taking photos with this, and there was no issues at all. The camera was extremely soaked. Even the next day, there was water dripping out of it, of the screen area and all that kind of stuff, but it worked 100%. The only issue with weather resistance I have found is the hot shoe. Because you have the contact points for the microphones, if they get wet, you can get some error messages, but it's not the camera malfunctioning, it's just it thinking something's plugged in. So if you just dry that area or use a bit of tape to cover it if you're going to be shooting in the rain, and you're fine. Now, if I'm actively going to be shooting in a downpour for many hours, I would use a plastic bag or something to protect it, because again, you don't want to risk it if you don't have to. However, if you do get caught out and you don't have that, then I don't see any reason why this wouldn't work. Ergonomics are the most subjective part of the video because your hands are different to mine, and what you find comfortable will be different to what I find comfortable. With that said, this is probably the first camera I've had that fitted me like a glove. Every single button is exactly where my fingers would naturally be, and when I hold it, I immediately feel comfortable, and I feel like I can just use it blindfoldedly without blindfolded. I can use it without looking and not have any issues. If I use it with a small pancake like this, it feels like a very compact camera. If I use it with a bigger lens like a 24-70 or 70-200, obviously it does feel a bit more front heavy, but the grip is so big that you can properly hold it, and it's not particularly a big issue. Other than that, the dials are where they should be. The screen's very easy to access. There's nothing really to complain about in terms of ergonomics. For some people, it might be a bit too big. That's where the A7C II can come in. For some people, it might actually be a bit too small if you have really big hands. And that is where the new style bodies on the A1 or the A9, which are bigger and have bigger grips, they might be a bit more comfortable for you. For me, I found them to be uncomfortable compared to this. For me, this so far is like the best of all the Sonys in terms of what I like. Now, there are plenty of buttons scattered all around the camera that can be customized to your heart's content. A few negative things before we get into the positives. So first of all, I am not sure why there's such inconsistency in the locking mechanisms. So this little dial on the back, which you can use to adjust, let's say ISO or shutter speed, it has a traditional lock and unlock, which is great. Whereas the actual mode dial, you have to push it in, hold it, and then twist. It means that this mode dial is a two-fingered, it's like a whole-handed operation. So if you're shooting, you can't just flick the mode dial between different modes, whereas on the A7CR or A7C2, because it's not lockable, you can do that. I wish it was the same style of locking buttons. I wish it just had a normal click and unclick, so I can adjust it with just a thumb, which right now I can't do. Small complaint. Also, it would have been nice to have like a little custom button right on the front where your some of your fingers sit. It's very easy and a natural place to have a button. I believe the A1, the new one, has that, but maybe in the version 6 of this, you might get that. And also these two top buttons right there, for some reason they're different levels. They're not level, so the one on the right sits a little bit lower, which is a bit unusual, and it's certainly a lot less comfortable than if they were both at the same level. But as you can probably see, I am very much nitpicking here. There are a lot more positives about the buttons and the customization. So let's first start with the top dial. Very easy to select which mode you want. I personally only use the 1, 2, 3 custom modes. There'll be a separate video about that. Each one has a different camera setup and you can choose. Typically I would use one for normal photography, one for low light photography, and one for slow shutter speed work as well. The video photo dial is very easy to reach, very quick to change from video to photo mode, which effectively gives you a completely different camera setup with different buttons and everything. That's great. The dials, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different dials, excluding the aperture ring on the lens, so you can really set them up however you want, which is also nice. And generally speaking, I have not found the need for any more custom buttons apart from the one on the front, or any more dials. Everything is where it should be, everything's easily accessible. So no issues there. In terms of how much you can customize this camera, honestly, the list is huge. It's very overwhelming when you first pick it up. I remember when I first went through the menu, I was like, how am I gonna get my head around this? Because it's an almost infinite amount of options. But a year later, I've got my head around it, and you can really fine tune it to how you shoot. You can even set one button to, when you press and hold it, it changes to a completely different camera setup. So that's really good as well. So yes, it's a complicated camera. Yes, it'll take you some time to learn it, especially if you're new to the Sony system. But honestly, it's not that hard. Don't listen to anyone online who says that it's particularly difficult or they are struggling. If you struggle to read or to understand basic things or to Google, then you might struggle with this camera, but honestly, it's not that bad at all. And once you've set it up, it becomes like an extension of you. I'm at a stage now where I never go into the menus. Everything is done by the buttons, and I know exactly how this camera behaves, which allows me to get the shot rather than just mess around. The screen is one of my favorite aspects of this camera because they have taken the two different worlds or two different types of people who want two different types of screen and put it into one. So if you're behind the camera, you're doing photography or you're filming, then of course flipping it out to the side makes the most sense. The camera is compact and it's central. If you're filming yourself, then you can simply flip it out like this. Or if you have a very awkward angle, you can do a bit of gymnastics and a bit of origami and have something kind of like this. The viewfinder is really good, very high resolution, probably the best viewfinder I've used, as long as you're not shooting in AFC, continuous autofocus. The moment you go into AFC and you actually focus, the resolution drops quite significantly to the point where you will notice it and it will be a bit jarring initially, but you get used to it. I suspect it's because the camera uses so much processing power when doing continuous autofocus that it can't process both the viewfinder and the focusing because it doesn't do it in any other focusing mode. So in AFS, you keep that excellent and high resolution viewfinder, but the viewfinder in short is very, very good with just that small price to pay. When it comes to performance, this camera is again very good. There's no surprises there. It switches on instantly. It's very quick to go through the menus, very responsive. There's no lag anywhere. I've used cameras before like the Leica, the Hasselblad, where you switch it on and you have to wait for 15 years for the camera to switch on, and then it's still not ready to go because then you have to wait for the autofocus to initialize. This doesn't really suffer from any of that. You switch it on, a second later, everything is on and good to go. When it comes to buffering, it's very quick, but there's a huge caveat, and that is you need to use the CF Express cards in order to have the best performance and the best user experience with this camera. If you use SD cards, it will still work, but you'll be limited with what you can do. You might be limited with how fast you can shoot, with how long it will take to clear and buffer those SD cards. And even with video, some video specs or codecs might not work with all types of memory. So something to keep in mind. If you're buying this camera, I would strongly suggest to factor in the cost of 2 CF Express cards in order to get the full, let's just say, experience. Now, the performance also carries over into what you do with the files, and this is one of the biggest prices to pay, and this is something that many people overlook. The files out of this camera are huge. It's 60 megapixels. You're getting 130 megabytes per file if you use the uncompressed mode. When it comes to video, if you're shooting in the highest quality possible, the files are going to be enormous. And not only is it taxing on your storage, but it's also going to be very taxing on the computer when it comes to editing these files. So at the moment when I'm traveling, I'm editing on an iPad Pro M4, and the difference between the files out of this camera and the files out of, let's say, a Fujifilm X-T4, which is a much lower resolution file, is insane. You know, the iPad gets red hot going through these files, whereas with the smaller files, it chews through them without a problem. Same with video. These things are always worth keeping in mind because too many people buy these high-end cameras and then don't have the workflow to deal with the files that come out of them. Now let's talk about my favorite thing about this camera. It's the sensor and specifically the image quality. With photography, if you've seen the previous video on the A7CR, it's basically the same with this. The resolution is insane. I very often shoot horizontally and then take vertical crops from the horizontal files. That way I get best of both worlds. I can crop in as far as I want to, reframe in editing, and you can just use one wider lens and get a bunch of different compositions, which is great. Dynamic range is insane, and the colors, they're fine. You know, there's definitely worse Sony cameras with worse color signs. This is probably one of the better ones. With that said, if you want straight out of camera JPEGs, which look great and filmic and nice, get a Fujifilm. With this, you would need to edit the files in order to get the most out of them. But that's not a problem because these files are very malleable, they're very editable. You can really push and pull them to your heart's content. Obviously, low light performance is very good. And with video, all of these positives that I've just mentioned carry over to video with one exception. I think the colors in video are really, really good just straight out the gate. For example, what you're watching right now, it's filmed on the A7CR, but it's the same sensor, so the result will be identical. And this is exactly as it is with just the Sony Rec 709 conversion LUT and S-Log3 footage, maybe a bit of brightness, slight correction to the white balance, but there is no grading. This is how it comes straight out of camera. All this resolution doesn't come for free, and of course you have to pay the price somewhere. With this particular camera, it's with rolling shutter performance. When it comes to photography, if you're shooting in silent photography mode or electronic photography mode, then be aware that you will have to deal with rolling shutter when it comes to fast moving subjects such as cars or anything that is really moving quickly close to the camera. You will see skewing, you will see a bit of warping. It's something you're going to have to keep in mind. So if you want to use electronic shutter or silent shutter, just be prepared to remain very still and shoot still subjects. With video, I found the rolling shutter to not be as bad, and unless you're literally shooting out of a train and there's buildings going like this, and they'll be a little bit skewed. But for the most part, the video is not as bad as some people make it out. But with photography, if you plan on shooting silently, you need to keep that in mind. Now, one thing I've noticed is the white balance in this seems to be a little bit erratic. So it applies to both photo and video. With video, you can thankfully use a feature called shockless white balance adjustment, where you basically tell the camera to not keep changing the white balance as you shoot in auto white balance. However, in photography, you can be taking a photo of the same scene, and for whatever reason the white balance will shift mid-scene without anything happening in front of you that might warrant such an extreme white balance change. Here's an example literally from yesterday when I was shooting. Nothing has really changed in the scene, as you can see. However, the white balance shift was quite substantial. Luckily, if you're shooting in RAW, this isn't an issue. You can correct it, you can normalize the files in editing. Obviously, if you're shooting in JPEG, you've just ruined some of your shots. Video, it can easily ruin a shot, but as I've said, luckily with video, you have a bit more control and you can lock the white balance. Now, some people can say just shoot in manual white balance, which you can, but I don't know, when I used to use Fujifilm and even Leica, I've never experienced such dramatic white balance changes. And I've not really noticed it that much on the a7rv either. So it's either something wrong with this, either something that I don't know, or maybe it's just, I don't know. So it's just something that I've noticed. Let's chat about autofocus, and it's astonishing. I mean, you've probably heard about Sony autofocus. It is that good. It just works. You don't have to worry about what focus mode you're in or what you're doing. You just point and it does what it needs to do. There is one slight exception. For some reason, in AFC, so continuous autofocus, the system is quicker and more reliable, whereas in AFS, which is single autofocus, it takes its time a little bit more. I'm not sure why. I suspect it's just a different way of acquiring focus, but with these cameras, most of the time you're shooting in AFC anyway, so it's not really a big deal. What I really like about the autofocus is you can again customize it to heart's content. You can also trigger different aspects of it using custom buttons. So for instance, AF on, I have it set so that when I'm holding it, it will track whatever I'm pointing the camera at. And even if I change orientation, recompose, the subject moves around or I move around, the subject stays in focus and the camera keeps tracking the subject. The AL button I've reprogrammed that when you press and hold it, the subject detection switches on, and then when you let go, it switches off. And then C1, I've programmed it to be single autofocus. We just press, it focuses, locks, and that's it. So great for still life or for focus and recomposing. Now the AF system is way more advanced than what I've just described. You can save faces, you can do all sorts of stuff that I would never personally do for my workflow, but yeah. You can shoot anything you want with this and it will work. At this point, I want to quickly thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I've been a paying customer way before they supported the channel and have now been using their services for over 5 years. Squarespace is at the center of my online presence and it's what drives my blog, portfolio, store and newsletter. I appreciate the simplicity of managing everything from a single app because it saves me time and gives me peace of mind knowing that I can make changes or deal with issues from my phone. If you have a business, a side hustle, or simply want your own little corner of the internet to host your photography or build something big, Squarespace offers all the tools you need across all devices. If you want to learn more, get a free trial and then 10% off your first purchase, use the link in the description or enter code RomanFox at checkout. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring and thank you for watching. If you follow my other YouTube channel or on Instagram, you would have seen me share little static video postcards. Basically static scenes of video that runs for 10 to 15 seconds of a nice scene. A common question that I get is if those videos were taken using a tripod because they're completely still. The answer to that is no. It's all handheld with this camera, and the IBIS coupled with the digital stabilization is absolutely insane. Literally, I will stand, just hold the camera like this, and that is all stabilization that I need. In DaVinci or Final Cut, you can stabilize it even more, but I find that I only have to do it on maybe 5 out of every 100 clips because everything else is absolutely fine straight out of camera. If you walk and you're gentle, and especially if you use a heavier lens because it just balances better, you can get an almost gimbal-like result if you use the active stabilization mode. Now it does crop in, but it's a feature that is incredibly useful for people who do a lot of video. For photography, the IBIS is great. It's like, what was it, 8 stops or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. It's really, really good. You can shoot handheld with slow shutter speeds. If you watch the previous shutter speed video that I posted, you would have seen me use that for that type of photography. So yeah, IBIS is really good. Now, appearances don't usually matter. However, sometimes they do. This looks like a professional camera. Sony's, especially this body style, is one of the most popular professional cameras in the world, and every professional Sony looks like a version of this to some degree. So when you're shooting in certain places where maybe they are hot on professional photography, or they don't want newspapers or paparazzi or whoever, and they see a camera like this, especially with a bigger lens, you might get pulled over and asked you shouldn't be taking photos with a professional camera. With other cameras like the X100 or the even a7C2, that's not a problem. I've been in situations before where I was using a small, let's say X100 Fuji style camera, and someone who I was with was using something like this. They got stopped and told not to use that camera, whereas the X100 that I was using was perfectly fine. So something small to keep in mind. All right, let's now move on to the final topic, which might be a bit of a contentious one. However, it's worth addressing, and that is fun factor. If you go on Reddit, where all the intelligent people have arguments on the internet, you will soon find threads surrounding the fact that this camera is boring. Sony's are boring, there's no soul. If you want a real camera, you just don't buy this. It's cheating because it does everything for you, all that kind of stuff. As someone who's owned and used Leicas, Hasselblads, Fujifilms, and obviously Sony's, I can say that there are two different extremes. If you want to be really involved in the photography process and you want the camera to be a part of the overall process, then you get a Leica M11 because you have the the rangefinder style camera, you have the manual focus, you have the slower and more deliberate approach to photography, and using the Leica is just as much fun as the photography itself. With the Sony cameras, it's the total opposite. You don't buy a Sony because you want to enjoy setting it up. I mean, you might, but that's just a bit odd. You buy this camera because you want it to get out of your way, and you don't want it to be a part of the photography process. So two very, very different approaches. Now, is this camera fun? For me, it is, because it allows me to just be completely present out there and to get photos, to get videos one after another without having to wrestle with the camera. Whereas with the Leica or Fujifilm or those types of cameras, it's a very different approach to photography. Neither is fun or not fun, it just depends on what you want to get out of it. However, if your main goal is to just capture the best photos, the best videos, and not have to be wrestling with a camera, then yes, this is a very fun camera to use. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope I've managed to share some experiences and thoughts on the Sony. As I've said many times, this is not me trying to sell this camera. You don't need this camera. It's a good camera, but is it essential? No. An A7CR, which is in front of me, can give you exactly the same sensor, exactly the same image for less money and in a more compact package. And if you don't care for 60 megapixels, you can get the A7C2 or the A7 IV for a lot cheaper and end up with all of the positives like the buttons and all this kind of stuff, but for much less money. If, however, you want this particular screen like this and you want 60 megapixels, then as it stands, this is your only option. The good thing with the a7rv is because it's been out for a couple of years now, when sales are on, it's reduced quite significantly. So I bought it during the Black Friday sales last year, and I've saved like over £1,000 compared to the full retail price. So if you wait for the right times, you can actually save a lot of money on this camera. Do I recommend it? In short, yes. If you want a photography first camera that can also be used as a video first camera, this is a pretty good option. There's not much else out there for the money that I think can beat it. And on top of that, you have a very open lens mount, so you can buy lenses from almost any manufacturer, stick them on. You also have APS-C shooting, so you can use APS-C lenses. So you get a lot in a pretty compact and, I don't know, pretty good package. So there's not much else I can say. It's a camera, isn't it? I mean, what else can you say about a camera? It works, it takes pictures, gets videos. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, thank you for watching. My brain is going because I don't really care much for talking about cameras, but these videos are popular and you like them. So I hope this has helped a few people. Thank you very much. I can't speak anymore. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Can't reach.